Hi, my name is Terence Eden. I work for Government Digital Service, which is part of the UK government, and NHSX, which is part of the UK's healthcare system. I'm going to be talking about open source and the lessons that we've learned from open sourcing the UK government and the lessons that we're applying to the NHS. As I go through, I'm going to be using some technical terms. If you're unfamiliar with them, or if I use an acronym or a word that you don't understand, please stick your hand up and ask me what I'm talking about, because if you don't understand, I guarantee someone else in the room will also be confused. Okay. Oh, beautiful. So the UK government has been in a period of transformation when it comes to the use of open source and open standards throughout the civil service. And I want to take a brief look at the history of what we did, why we did it, and the lessons that we are learning, and the message that we want to share with all of you. So this is what the British government's website looked like a few years ago. I don't know if you like the colour orange, but everyone there, no one in the UK liked this website. It was horrible. It was badly designed. It was badly thought through. It was one of these websites where if we wanted to make a change to it, we had to wait 6 months because no, the release cycle for this is every 6 months. So you've got an urgent change. Something has changed in government. 6 months. It was slow. It was inefficient. We didn't have great control over it. So we changed it. We said this isn't the way that we design software in the modern world anymore. We need to move to something which is open source, which we fully control, and this is what we ended up with. It is less orange, which is a good thing, and it works. And because we have designed it to be open source from the start, we are fully in control of it, we understand how this works. We've gone from 1 release every 6 months to 10 releases every day. It is engineered in such a way that if we wanted to update it every minute of every day, we can do that. And we have gone from having a confusing, complex code base which was owned by someone else to a simpler code base which is owned by us and is shared with everyone, not just everyone in the department, not just everyone in government, not just everyone in the UK, but everyone. Anyone can take our open source code and build their own government website if they want. And that's what we see happening. We have dramatically lowered the cost for us and for everyone else to build amazing websites. And that's only been through the power of open source. So why though? Okay, so it comes down to this. It is cheaper. Using open source is cheaper. Rather than going off and buying a component, we can look at GitHub or any other open source repository and go, oh, that does what we need, we'll use that. It's faster. We know that there are, if we want to get developers to work on our code, we know there are developers who are familiar with the way that open source works and they are familiar with our code base. It's great. It is more secure. Open source is more secure. Our National Cyber Security Centre have quite happily said that there are no security risks, no more security risks, I should say, using open source than there are using proprietary software. So we are very happy with the security of the code. It also means that anyone from around the world can look through our code and say, oh, there's a security bug there. Great. And we think it's the right thing to do. We are funded by the taxpayer. They have a right to see how the systems which run their lives work. You know, you don't have to pay to read the law. You shouldn't have to pay to read how the law is applied via a website. And we think this is exactly the same in the NHS, our health service. If a computer is making decisions about you, your life, your health, you should be able to understand how and why it is making those decisions. And you can't do that on a closed system. You need to be able to look at the source code to understand it. We also have this aim in the UK that we want to spend, for every £3 we spend, we want to spend at least one of them with a small business, a small to medium enterprise. And we know that when we have used closed source in the past, that makes it much harder for a small company to do business with the government, because if we're using closed source or closed standards or proprietary things, well, a small business can't always afford to buy into that ecosystem to start interacting with us. When we say all of our code is open, it relies on open standards that you do not have to pay to access, it means small businesses can work with government, and that's fantastic. We want to reinvigorate the economy so that small businesses can work with government, rather than just seeing the same old, I'm not going to name them because I'm on video, but you know, the same old big companies that come in and win all the government contracts. We want to diversify. That's good for the health of the systems that we're building. So just stick your hands up if you've ever been to prison. No one? What a very good audience here, a very refined, select audience. All right, put your hands up if you've ever visited someone in prison. Yeah, this is a very common thing. People go to prison. You don't get a... Here's the thing about government, is you don't get a choice whether to use us or not. You know, you can choose not to use Google and use Yahoo Mail. You can choose not to use Microsoft and use someone else. But you kind of don't get a choice whether or not to use the government. If you want to visit someone in prison, you have to come through us. And the process for visiting someone in prison, so we know, we want people to be visited in prison. If you are visited, you are, let me get this right, 39% more likely to re-offend if not visited. So if no one comes to see you in prison, you're more likely to go on and commit another crime. We want people to come and visit people in prison. We want to reduce re-offending. That's what prisons are there for. But this is a process that you used to have to do. So this is a paper form, and you'd have to go to an office, get the paper form, fill it out by hand, post it off. Someone would open it, read it, type it into a system. Oh no, you've made a mistake. We're going to have to send this form back to you. You know, that's another postal trip and another expense. Okay, now I'm more stressed. I have to write. And this is a bad system. If we want to stop people re-offending, if we want people to come and visit you in prison, I don't know why I looked at you, visit you in prison, we want to make this easier. We want to make this faster. We want to make it better. We want to make it cheaper. So we reimagined the service. What would this look like if we were designing this system for a modern era? Because this paper form, I don't think this has changed for 500 years. You know, we've been putting people in prison for a long time, and the form probably hasn't been updated for a while. I don't even think that has an email address on there. No, it doesn't. So now we have a nice open source website where you can go in and say, okay, I want to visit someone in prison. It's an online form. If you make a mistake on the form, it will tell you. This is good, simple stuff. And it's there. It's on GitHub. If your country wants to build a prison visiting form, there's a clone button there or a fork button there. You can copy our code. It's under the MIT license, which is a free license. And you can start building on this. Because if we can reduce reoffending rates around the world, is that a good thing? Yeah, I think that's a good thing, yeah. At least you all agree with me. It also gives us a chance to reimagine what we want on a form. So, I mean, some of these things here, do we need, you know, what is, your friend is in prison, what is their prisoner number? How do you find that out? You know, you ring someone up, I don't know. When we build a service like this, you know, we can start saying, okay, so who is this person, where are you going, you know, your date of birth, what format should that date of birth be? We can start reimagining these services so they are fit for the 21st century, because that's, you know, we live in the future. It's amazing, but we've got to work hard to turn something like that into something like that. And because this is open source, it means that other government departments can learn from it. So there's only one government department which deals with prisoner visits, but there are plenty of other departments which deal with other visits. Let's say you want to visit someone in hospital, or visit your MP, or visit somewhere else. Well, we can share this code with other government departments internally, and they don't have to pay millions of pounds for some consultant to build the same thing that has already been built. We want to reduce the amount of code that we are writing, and open source is the best way to do that. Oh, I also like this as well. So you can see, if you think this idea is crap, if you think we shouldn't have done this, You can go to this website here and see how many people are on the site right now booking a prison visit. You can see how many people over the last year have used this rather than using the paper form, because we believe in transparency. You know, the British taxpayer has paid for all of this. We should let them see how well it is being used. If it is not being used well, we should be open about that and say, actually, we built this thing, no one's using it. Okay, we made a mistake. As it happens, this gets used a lot, so I encourage you to visit that site. In the UK, there is a tax benefit paid if you have children. As you can imagine, this benefit gets paid out a lot. There are lots of children. And again, this was a very cumbersome form, a very complicated form, because tax is always complicated. And it's now, okay, we've reimagined it, we've put it up on the web, you can click, great, it's all sorted. But we made a mistake. Turns out we're not perfect. I know it's a big shock, but it turns out that no one that we employ is perfect. It's a great shame, but there we are. And so we published this code, and it was wrong. We made a mistake on there. And the great thing about it being on GitHub is a member of the public came along and went, you did it wrong. Here is the way that you have done it. And this chap here at Brakos, hi if you're watching, came along and said, look, there is a mistake. It's quite a complicated technical one, but here it is. And that's fantastic. How wouldn't you love it if people told you you made a mistake, rather than writing to the paper and saying, oh, this is rubbish, or writing to a customer service centre where it never gets seen again. We want people to come in and tell us directly, there is a mistake here, and we can have a dialogue with them, work out if it is a mistake, and then fix it. As it turns out, we didn't fix this mistake. He did. He submitted a pull request to the UK government saying, here is how you fix your mistake. And we looked through it and we did the due diligence that you would do for any new code and go, yep, accept, merge. And then it goes live on the site. Why wouldn't we do that? If someone from the public wants to spend their time and effort helping us, why wouldn't you accept that? Yes, we need to make sure that they've written it properly and it passes all the tests, and you do a test in pre-production and deployment and all these things. People want to help. People like raising bug reports saying this thing doesn't work for me, and some of them love fixing the broken stuff. Of course we're going to accept that. And that's the same across the health service as well. We've released a website and someone pointed out to us it wasn't accessible. That's bad. That's a really big mistake on our part, because we have a legal obligation to be accessible. And they provided us with all the details and a change request, a pull request. We were able to fix the site based on their feedback. We wouldn't be able to do that if we locked all of our code away and said, no, this is ours. This is private. No one's allowed to see it. No one's allowed to comment on it. Why wouldn't we make it open? And it boils to this. So put your hand up if you've worked for the same company for more than 15 years. More than 10 years? Put your hands up if you've never worked anywhere for more than 3 years. Okay, that's just me. Yeah, a few of us. People move on. I would love it if our developers never left. I'd like to keep them all because they are lovely, wonderful, brilliant people. But they are going to change jobs. Everyone you employ is going to leave. I'm sorry, but they are, because there's a better job offer over there from Facebook or Google or the government or a cool startup. Developers leave. So what do we do? Do we say, we never want you to leave? Do we say, we'll pay you more to stay? Well, as a government, we can't always afford to do that. No. Our commitment to developers coming to work for the NHS is we will give you an amazing opportunity to work on the biggest systems in the world, and you will build up a portfolio doing it. When you go, our promise to you is when you go off for that cool job, this amazing startup, and they say, can you tell me about a time when you worked on a complex code base? You can go to GitHub and say, here is me fixing the NHS on the website, and you can see what I have done. That's fantastic. We know that we want the best way to attract talented people is to accelerate them and say, when you leave us, because we know you're going to leave us, you're going to be better than when you started, and we're going to let you tell the world how amazing you are. And when we are doing job interviews, it also means that we can say, you've taken a look at our code base because it's on GitHub, what did you think? And people can give an honest reply. Or they can look through GitHub, see the way we deal with pull requests and merges and conflicts and go, I don't like that, I don't like the culture there, I don't want to work for you. And that's fine too. Most of the time they say, I love the culture there, I want to come and work for you. But we need to be open and transparent, because if we want to attract, with government salaries are very rarely as good as Facebook and Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all these big companies. It's the way of the world. So if we can't attract people, talented developers with money, what can we do? And being able to say, you will work in the open, you will show off the amazing things you do to your peers, is a really good way to attract some developers, not all, some. But it's not all sunshine and roses. So we get lots of pushback from people. So I'm going to go through some of the really common excuses that we hear and how we push back against them, because we truly believe this is the right thing to do, but not everyone does. Open source is not secure enough. Put your hands up if you've heard someone say open source is not secure. Oh. Yeah. It's not true. So our National Cybersecurity Centre have released several reports saying open source is just as secure as proprietary software. And in fact, this is WannaCry. This is a cyber attack which happened on the NHS, which you can read all the reports about it, but it ravaged our entire estate. And it wasn't caused by open source, it was caused by unpatched Microsoft Windows boxes. And now, I'm not saying if all those boxes were running Linux, there would be no problems. Maybe. But that's a different argument. But we know that just because something is closed, it doesn't make it secure. And what we've done with the NHS is we've now worked out what boxes we've got, and we've patched them, and we're upgrading them. But we know that just saying, oh, it's closed source, that means it's secure. We know that's not true. This is one that we get a lot in government, and you might have heard it too. Our work is too sensitive, it is too important, it is too secretive to do in the open. And that might be true, but GCHQ, which is part of our Secret Intelligence Service, they're on GitHub. Now, they are not publishing operational details of who they're tracking and what they're doing on GitHub, but the code that they're writing to manage their systems and to do all sorts of cool stuff is there. It's on GitHub. And we quite often say, when someone from the health service says, we can't put it up on open source, it's not secure. It's like, well, is what we're doing more secure than GCHQ? Is it more secure than the National Crime Agency? If it is, okay, fine, we'll develop it in a bunker somewhere and have armed guards standing around all the developers so they don't leak anything. But the reality is, most of the stuff that we do, most of the stuff that you do, is not more sensitive than what these teams are doing. It's okay to code in the open. And we're making that very clear across the NHS that this is what we expect. Here's a good one. How many of you use the same password in more than one account? Oh, don't turn the camera around, it's too depressing. Oh. If that password leaks, that's bad. That means your email, your Facebook, your Twitter, and everything else, your banking, it's all gone. So we are really concerned about this. What happens if one of our developers puts the the secret key, the password, into GitHub and hits deploy? Good. Good, I say. I think that's an excellent thing, because this will test whether our emergency procedures are any good. Because here's the thing, as I said earlier, put your hand up if you are perfect. Anyone here perfect? Anyone here never makes mistakes? You don't make mistakes, we'll hire you. We're going to screw up at some point. Some developer, whether they are a junior who's just come in or someone who's senior who's just having a bad day, is going to put in a secret key and hit deploy, and it is going to go onto GitHub. It's going to happen, we know that. That is why every department should have a big red button, and when something like this happens, you push the button and you say, okay, we now need to rotate all of our secret keys, we need to check the logs to see if anyone has abused them, we need to, all the stuff that you would usually do, because you all have like disaster recovery procedures, right? One person does, two people do, good. We all need them, and we need to test them and practice them. Yes, we can set up all sorts of things to make sure secret keys don't get pushed to production, and you should be doing that. But just saying what happens if our developers make a mistake It's not an excuse. They will make mistakes, and we have to be ready to understand how we learn from those mistakes. And in fact, we have a whole bunch of security tools which we've coded in the open, and you can go to HMRC, so Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. They've been collecting tax for, I don't know, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, I don't know. They've been collecting tax for a long time. They're a big, old organisation, and their stuff is open source. Their leak detection stuff is on GitHub. And why? Well, there is no point them doing it and saying, well, we're protected. No one's going to get HMRC's secret keys. We don't care about the rest of government. No, they want all of us to be secure in government, because if one part leaks, it looks bad on all of us. And in actual fact, if anyone around the world, whether they're in government or the NHS or whatever, publishes their secret keys, that weakens the security ecosystem for everyone. So of course we want to put this live and open source so that everyone can benefit. This is also the UK Home Office. They have a repository security scanner. If you want to use this code in production on your repos, please do. This is open source for a reason, because we believe that when you raise security for everyone, it raises security for everyone. That's a good thing. Of course we're going to do this. It just seems naturally right to us. This is a big one. What if other countries steal our code? Oh my God. Good, good, wonderful. If we've written something and it works for you, please use it. If it saves you time and money, use it. Of course we're going to share this. So this is the New Zealand government. They have taken some of our code, they've used it to build their websites and their other stuff, because they know that the code that we have written has served, 70 million citizens and goodness knows how many other visitors. It works, it's been production tested. Great, they're going to use it. This is the government of Israel using some of our code in production. This is the Australian government. They've got our digital marketplace, which is where you can buy and sell services to government. We released the code, they've taken the code. I mean, okay, they haven't just cloned the repository and done Control-F UK and then replaced that with Australia. It's a bit more complicated than that. But not much more complicated. It's a lot less complicated than building this yourself. So we've got some processes in place, and again, we publish all of these as blog posts and as document papers, so you can use them as well. We insist that any project starts with user needs. So we don't just go, I want to build. No. We find out who our users are, what problems they're having, how we can solve that. And we publish that as well. Now, our users are going to be different from your users, but you can understand what it is we're doing, the problems we're trying to solve. We start with small prototypes. This is the hardest thing I find to explain, especially to senior leaders. We say, we are going to fail. Who wants to go to their boss and say, hi, boss, can I have some money to fail, please? What? No, go away and succeed. But it doesn't work like that. We know that if we say we're going to build a £10 million project, it's going to take 10 years to deliver, it's going to fail. Obviously it's going to fail. And when it does fail, that's a lot of money that we've wasted. What we want to say is we're going to build 5 things, each for £100,000. 3 of them are probably going to fail, but they will fail early enough that it will save us money rather than building a big thing and it failing later. So when we start building alphas, we say, okay, we're going to build something quickly in a few weeks for not much money. We will test it with users. If at that point all the users say, I don't like this, this doesn't solve my problems, I can't use this, why would I want that? Okay, we stop. We leave the code open source if someone wants to take it on, but we go, okay, we've wasted a few weeks, that's sad, but it's better than wasting months and years and millions of pounds. If an alpha does pass its assessment, great, we throw it away. Because it's an alpha, it's just there as a sketch, just to see whether it works. And then we start building a beta, learning on what we've learned from the alpha. And again, we take that through a checkpoint and say, has this met its requirements? Is it open source? Does it meet user needs? Does it use open standards? How much is it going to cost? All these things. And some of those will fail as well. And that's fine. better to fail before going into production than going into production and being on the front page of the newspaper saying this service doesn't work. And again, if it fails or if it succeeds, we take the code, it's there, it's open source. If someone wants to pick it up later or thinks that we made a mistake and they can do it better, great, go at it. Why would we throw away an asset like that? It just doesn't make any sense to us. And then we go live and we continue coding in the open so that people can see the improvements and the changes that we're making. Yes, a question?
How often do you go through all these steps? You have something that passes alpha, but is rejected in beta.
How often we go through all these steps? It should be for every IT project. How often do betas fail? I don't know. I think we probably published that somewhere because we publish lots of stats. So if you drop me your email afterwards, I'll see if I can find it. So the other day we failed a project, and so I was on an assessment and we said, so when we say fail, we're not saying, right, your team, you're a failure, piss off, you know, you're all fired. We don't do that. What we say is, if you want to pass, you need to do this, this, and this. And sometimes they go, we can't do that, we'll stop. Or sometimes they go, okay, we'll be back in 6 weeks' time to show that these things have improved. We want it to be a supportive process rather than a you're fired process. But I'll see if I can find out, because it's an interesting question. This is the digital service standard, and again, we publish this in the open. This is published under, how many of you are familiar with Creative Commons as a license? Yeah, a few of you. So Creative Commons is a sort of open source license for text, if you like. For some reason, we decided that we didn't want to call it Creative Commons, we call it the Open Government License, but the text of it is basically the same as Creative Commons. So if you want to use our digital service standard in your organisation or your government or your health service, you can do. And in that's what we're doing with the NHS, is we've looked at the government's service standard, we've copied and pasted it and changed the word government to health and a bit more. But yeah, that very first point there, understand user needs. That's where all of this starts from. And then this, make all new source code open. This is the commitment that we have made, and that's what we're making in the health service, what we're making in government, is that when you start a new project, you do it in the open. And one of the things we often hear is we're gonna code this privately, and then when we're ready to launch, once we've passed beta, we're going to publish it. That's a lie. No one ever does that, because, oh no, we can't publish it because it's got our secret keys. Oh no, we haven't checked. Oh, there are all sorts of excuses. We know people are fallible. People make mistakes. We want to encourage best practice from the beginning, and so this is why we say code in the open. From the very first commit to your project should be on GitHub or GitLab or some other open source system where people can see it. You need to get into that habit early, because we know people get lazy and they get a bit complacent, and if they think that this is nice and private, they'll do silly things. In fact, one of the I can't remember if I have it on these slides. One of the excuses that we get is, no, we can't be open source because what if our developers leave a rude comment in the comments, or give a variable name a silly name? Well, fire them and get better developers. I mean, I don't know what, sometimes developers do daft things. I do daft things all the time. But most people are professionals. And, when you're working together, when you're coding in the open, when you're pairing with someone, you hopefully have someone to catch you and say, you know what, you can't put that in an open source repository. You can't say, I hate so-and-so. People are generally professional. But here's the thing. So there are some downsides. Absolutely. And the first is that people get nervous about performing in public. Lots of people do not like standing in front of an audience and speaking. Lots of people don't like standing in front of an audience and showing their code. It can be quite nerve-wracking. And so we have to be supportive of people, and we have to tell our developers and our designers, we've got your back on this. We're going to protect you. You're not going to do anything which is going to end the world. We will support you. External people question choices without having the full information. So there's sort of two sides to this. Sometimes someone will, write a news article. Lazy GovUK developers choose some obsolete JavaScript framework because they're all idiots. Or maybe we chose it because there's a set of assumptions and learnings that we haven't explained properly. So we've got to get better at explaining what we do. We've also got to make sure that people know why we're choosing to do what we do. On the other side, if we were working on a top secret program, you don't necessarily want to put that live straight away if you don't want anyone to know that this is what's going to happen. But we need to be able to explain our decisions. If we can't explain our decisions to the people who are paying for this work to be done or who are going to rely on this work, then we've made a mistake somewhere. We've got to be able to explain and justify what we're doing. That's part of being open. Yes, a question.
How big a deal is this in your everyday work?
How big a deal is this in our everyday work?
Yeah, I'm asking because we represent the commercial side of this, and even a small notice in a paper or in computer world or something like that can trigger internally totally disproportionate responses that because the understanding, the full context is not understood, not by the outside, but also not
by the inside.
By the inside. Yeah.
There's a very reasonable point for the camera. How often does this affect us when people internally don't have the full context? It happens, probably more than it should. What we have to do is build a supportive environment where your manager knows that they have justified it and they've got approval from their manager or whatever the process is. And certainly in NHSX, our CEO is fully committed to the idea of us being open source, and most CTOs and CEO equivalents in other government departments have bought into this. So they are aware of what the process is. And yes, sometimes, why have you done that? It can be a legitimate question. So it happens, and I don't have a great answer for how we can fix it, because humans make mistakes. Sometimes we will do stuff which is wrong. Sometimes we will do it and we haven't explained it properly. So we just, one of the best skills that I think we are lacking, certainly in the NHS, is documentation. So developers love writing code. Developers hate writing documentation because documentation is for, I don't know, boring. It's not as cool as code. But documentation is vitally important. One of the things we're not great at is the README page on an open source project. Quite often the README will say, deploy this to Heroku using snaps and tars, and okay, great, what does this thing do? Oh, great. The first line should always be, this is a thing which does this thing because X, Y, and Z, we spoke to users, blah, 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 and then here is how you use it. That, I think, can help reduce some of those problems, especially if you can show that it's user demand. So we have lots of guidelines. We make sure that we don't leave developers by themselves to go off and build crazy things. We make sure that we use the sort of typical agile stuff of sprints and all of this stuff, and we make sure that developers are paired together so that if one of them goes off, someone else in the building still knows what's going on. And then this is the last big bit, which is community. We can't do this by ourselves. I mean, I wouldn't want to do this by ourselves. We rely on a community, not just in the same office, and not just in the same department, or not just in the government, not even in the country. This is why I'm here, is because I want all of you to help, and I want to help where we can with what you're doing. So we typically release all of our code as MIT, although there are some discussions about whether that's the right license. I'm happy to chat about that afterwards. Because we want everyone to be able to look at it and use it in production. But what we also want to do is foster a good community. So all of our repos have a code of conduct, which is forked from contributor covenant, which says you're not allowed to be racist or sexist or aggressive, and it's all the stuff which helps build up a community and says, you are welcome here. If you want to come and help us, we are going to protect you, we're going to do our best to keep you safe, we're going to foster a good environment. Some of the projects we release as open source, no one ever looks at. And that's a little depressing, but I would much rather that it was there and no one looked at it than it was hidden away and someone wanted to look at it. Some of them get used hundreds of thousands of times around the world, and some of them get lots of contributors, and some of them get 1 or 2. We're trying to build a community around the world of people who want to make government better, who want to make healthcare better, who want to make society better. And we think the best way to do that is to be as open, as transparent as possible, and to foster good communities, to go out to events like this, to go out to schools, to go out to hackathons, and say, we want you to work with us, because ultimately we are, we're trying to make, in our case, we're trying to make the UK a better place. In your case, you're trying to make your countries, your societies, your companies better places. Building strong communities, we think, is the best way to do that, and that is why we are fully committed to open source and open standards. TAC. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any more.
There's one there.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I probably have one as well.
How far are you in open sourcing the different sectors you have? Because you have touched upon some of them.
Yes.
Public-facing systems.
Yep.
But how far are you in some of the sectors you have put far?
How far are we in some of the sectors? So I think, so I can't speak for every sector because I don't work there, but as far as I'm aware, every department has an open source page, whether that's GitHub or GitLab or somewhere else. Some of them are more advanced than others, but all of them have signed up to this commitment that anything new they do will be open source. We do have lots of legacy stuff, which isn't open source, and that's an interesting challenge for us because some of it, is a code base which is 20 years old, 30 years old, is written in COBOL or something like that. I mean, you can open source COBOL, but will anyone read it and understand it? But do we have the rights and the licenses to publish this as open source? So it's a journey. We are not going to finish that journey ever, I think. But every single department, certainly throughout NHS, throughout central government, and increasingly lots of local governments as well, are doing this. So we are building a huge community. Thank you. It's a great question. Rasmus.
Could you elaborate a bit on how the commercial side fit in this? How do the vendors actually make money?
How do the vendors make money?
Yeah, or do you develop everything? Do you develop everything yourself?
So we don't develop everything ourselves. So there's a couple of strands to this. Some of the stuff we develop ourselves. Now, government is a non-profit enterprise, I guess. We don't make money, we don't sell this stuff, so that's fine. Sometimes we buy services. So we ask your company, please can you build us this thing? But we say, and at the end of it, we want the source code. So that we can do that, and that's part of the commercial negotiations. Some stuff we buy, a commercial off-the-shelf bit of software which is closed source. As part of our procurement process, we always say, is there an open source alternative that you can use which would meet your needs? And sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And even when there is, if it doesn't meet the needs, if it's not as good as a closed source one, okay, we go to the closed source one. But what we say is, everything must use open standards. And that for us is one of the key. We don't want a big company to come along, offer us a system, we put all of our data in it, and then we say, hey, we'd like to move to a different company. And they go, well, all of your data is trapped in this proprietary format, which happens. So we say, okay, you want to buy this big database, it must be able to spit everything out as CSV or MySQL, or it must be able to speak whatever the common language is for that sort of system. So yeah, we can't tell a private company, you must open source all your code. But what we can say is, if we're buying from you, we want the ability to move our data around different systems, if that's what we choose to do. Yes?
What have the reaction from the vendors been on your demand on open source? If the vendors prefer work on closed source, what do you say to your demand?
So all of our tenders business tenders and public. So if you go to, I forget the URL, but there's a digital marketplace and digital outcomes things where we list, we say we want to buy this sort of thing. Here are the specs that we want, and then anyone can come and bid on this. And sometimes we say it needs to be open source, and sometimes not. Some vendors have adapted to this, and I think some vendors haven't. We want to buy stuff which is in the best long-term interests of what we're trying to do, and sometimes that will be buying from a vendor who is only interested in closed source stuff, and sometimes it's about us saying we want to stimulate the market, and if a smaller or more agile vendor can meet our needs, well, we'll go with them. How do I put this? Some vendors like it, some vendors don't. And the vendors who like it, well, they'll get our money. I mean, we are in the fortunate position that we spend quite a lot of money with quite a lot of people, and there is no shortage of people who would like to sell services to government. So I hope that answers the...
the vendors that doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Are they claiming this is unequal?
Right. So, are they claiming it's illegal? No. So, when we're selecting open standards, for example, we follow the CAMS process, which is an EU process, which is, I think, it's a common assessment model. Probably got that acronym wrong, and someone on YouTube will correct me. Which is like a 48-point questionnaire, where when we're selecting an open standard, we can justify that, we aren't restricting anyone from operating in the marketplace. Similarly with open source, our procurement laws, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not a procurement lawyer, say that we are allowed to choose vendors based on certain considerations. So for example, we might say, what is the environmental impact of your solution? If yours is cheaper than yours, but yours pollutes more than yours, we can choose yours. Similarly, please don't pollute more, that's a horrible thing to do. But similarly, when we're assessing vendors, that can be a legitimate restriction to say, and we prefer open source, because by and large there's nothing stopping them from participating in that if that's what they want to do. So, any more? Yes? So.
Cooperation with two or more vendors.
Yes.
Same application. How do you handle that? I mean, it can be a bit tricky too.
How do we handle collaboration between multiple vendors? I don't know. That's not something that I've specifically seen. I know for some stuff, we have GitHub repos where we are working on it and the vendor is working on it at the same time, and that works like any other project. As long as there's good communication and everyone understands what that sprint is all about, what the tests are they need to do. I don't know how we do it with multiple vendors. Sorry.
Damn.
I'm sure it's fine. It's, okay, well, I'll be around until I think 1 o'clock today if anyone has any more questions. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks.
Thank you.